This is extremely good news for Penguins fans as we get some insight into Bryan Rust's future as a Pittsburgh Penguin from Kyle Dubas himself, and this will have Penguins fans absolutely fired up as there's been a lot of trade rumors, reports thrown out there about Bryan Rust in the last few days. We're going to break it all down here in this episode of Penguins Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the Pittsburgh Penguins, go down below, hit that free subscribe button because this is the place to be for all your daily Pittsburgh Penguins content. But let's jump right into it. The last 32 Thoughts podcast of this season was just released, and Elliotte Friedman went off. He had a lot of updates about a lot of different things, and he went on to say that there is a ton of interest in Bryan Rust. Now, Bryan Rust's contract is an interesting one. His, no movement clause has just been removed, I guess, from the contract. The last couple years of the contract did not have the no movement clause. It was front loaded with that. So, of course, that's been removed on July 1st, and now he can be traded without him really having any say in the matter. Same with Rickard Rakell, by the way, that Friedman has heard that Rakell prefers to stay, but it's not his call. Obviously, Kyle Dubas can do whatever he wants now at this point with these two players specifically. Erik Karlsson is an interesting one. Bonus has been paid. His actual cash is reeled down, and Friedman has wondered about Florida and Dallas for Erik Karlsson, but doesn't see how that works. So very interesting tidbits from Elliotte Friedman. Now, you must be saying, Darius, where's the good news here for Penguins fans? Because, all I'm hearing and seeing so far is that there's a bunch of teams interested in Bryan Rust and that he's going to be traded and that it's now easier to trade him. And you're right. It is easier to trade him. But let's take a look at the actual player and what he brings to the team first. And then we'll get into why this is good news for the Pittsburgh Penguins and their fans, because there's two ways to look at it here, I think. And it's, both of them are really good for the Penguins organization and their fans. But first of all, some people are saying that he's overrated. They don't understand why, he's on the trade market, that his name's out there. And Pens Insider went on to say that 215 NHL players were paid an AAV more than Bryan Rust last season. That includes maybe 8 to 10 goalies, by the way. Keep that in mind. And of the 200 plus actual skaters, only 39 of them produced at a point per game clip higher than Bryan Rust. This guy is underrated, if anything. One of the best players right now. Could be a top line player. There's Leafs fans and a lot of chatter about the Toronto Maple Leafs and, of course, that connection with Kyle Dubas. And if you'd want some of the prospects and the futures that he helped develop in that organization back into Pittsburgh. So I think that's pretty interesting. A lot of fans, Toronto, it's no secret. They need a top line player. Bryan Rust would fit in perfectly for them, especially with 31 goals. If you take a look at what he produced last season, played 71 games. He had 31 goals in those 71 games. He had 34 assists. So we know what he's about. Pretty equal output for Bryan Rust at 65 points in 71 games, almost a point a game player, playing with Sidney Crosby on that top line. We know what he brings to a lineup. He is a great player. He can play in your top six. Very versatile player out there on the wing. And of course, let's not look at the plus minus. We know that the goaltending wasn't that great, especially for large chunks of last season. So wouldn't pin that specifically on him. And I think that's more of a team stat anyway, even though some players get stuck with that. But, in speaking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, Chell Penguins goes on to say that Bryan Rust just put up 31 goals and 65 points in 71 games, almost a point a game player. Top minutes on both special teams too, by the way, so he can play in all situations, which is something the Toronto Maple Leafs are actually looking for. And he's a proven playoff performer, right? We know that when the Penguins have made the playoffs, this is a guy that has chipped in and doesn't shy away from those big moments, which is something that the Leafs are looking for. So I do wonder if Kyle Dubas can, if he does end up wanting to trade Bryan Rust, get something big out of Pittsburgh. And that's kind of what, I was referring to in this video. What's the good news for Pittsburgh Penguins fans? Well, first of all, the good news is this could go either way. He could be traded. He could not be traded, but they're both great options, because if he is traded, Kyle Dubas is going to get a massive haul in return for Bryan Rust. He's going to get younger and start turning, he's going to turn Bryan Rust into very valuable assets that he can either trade or, develop in the system. And then they're going to come up and be great NHL players. And if he holds on to him, Bryan Rust is a great player who put up 31 goals last season. He's a little bit of an older player. I say older, of course, 33 is not that old, but by the end of his contract, he's going to be 36, getting up there in age. But, and of course, for an athlete, not, in everyday regular life. But Of course, he's a great player, and he can be a mentor for some of the young guys that are coming through the system, like a Rucker McGroarty, for example, who's probably going to be playing with him if he's not traded on that top line next season, which I think is very exciting. Now, you can see here from Kelsey, she's basically debunking a lot of, what everyone has out there right now, and the fact that Kyle Dubas, came out and said that he's probably not going to trade Bryan Rust at this point in time. You can see here from this article that he said, what he was talking about when moving Bryan Rust, or if he was going to move Bryan Rust, he's only going to do it if an offer blows them away. That's a direct quote. The offer has to blow Kyle Dubas away in order to trade Bryan Rust. And like I said, if you take a look at his stats from last season, I mean, you should get a massive haul for a guy like this. This is a guy that, you could keep around in the organization, can continue to put up points. I mean, you need guys to actually play on the team and make an impact next season. So this is a guy you could hang on to. And like I mentioned, he can be a mentor for some of the younger guys on the team. So realistically speaking, there's no incentive, there's no real reason to give this guy away for absolutely nothing. It's got to be a massive haul, or you're going to keep him on the team. And I think that's okay. And I think some Penguins fans would be okay with that. So, again, Kelsey was saying, I think many falsely assume that Kyle Dubas' only reason for keeping Rust around are nostalgia and leadership, which is kind of what I was talking about. But she said there's a bigger context to it. There's more to it. And everyone's already rolled with the assumption that the plan is for this team to not compete for 5+ years. And I think that has clouded people's assessment of Rust and Raquel, because Raquel had a career year last year too, and we're not focusing on him too much in this video, but had a career year last year, and he's on the trade block too. And a lot of people are saying, oh, trade him for assets for futures as well. But Dubas has said multiple times, this is from Kelsey again, that they want to return the team to contention as urgently as possible. This is not like a rebuild that, is definitely going to be 3 years or definitely going to be 5 years. He said nothing about that. He wants to retool here. He wants to get back to contention as soon as possible, so Sidney Crosby has a competitive team to play with before he retires. That's the plan here. So is he going to execute on that? I don't know, right? I can't say that, but that's the plan. That's what Kyle Dubas is trying to do. So, he's only going to trade a guy who is on the team making a difference right now for a massive haul. So you have to consider the fact that perhaps Dubas sees the Penguins competing again before Rust's contract expires, because Rust's contract only expires, basically, we'll get into that too, in 3 years, right? So still only going to be 36, 37 when that expires. So he might see value in keeping him to bridge that gap. So again, it's going to be very interesting. A team has to come in and be like, I want Bryan Rust, and we're going to give up a lot of great pieces for that for Kyle Dubas to want to trade him. I think that's good news for Penguins fans, because listen, one way or another, things stay the same. He can mentor some of the younger guys. He can still put up a lot of points. And if the team does turn around in the next year or two, he's still that guy, right? He's still that guy. And then again, if you do trade him for a massive haul, you're getting some really, really good pieces back, and this team's going to be better for it anyway. I don't know when, right, if you're getting futures, but this team's going to be better for it. And even if you get futures like draft picks in return, you can flip those draft picks, go get players that can make an impact right now, some younger players. So pretty interesting stuff. I think Dubas has the team in a pretty decent spot in terms of not necessarily on ice next season, but in a decent spot where if he wants to, he can go out, make some significant moves, has a lot of salary cap space. So it's going to be very interesting. So that is why the asking price is so high, and they're hesitant to move him, because they think that they can hang on to him. And if they do turn it around in 2 years, he'll still be here and he can make an impact, right? So last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up here is, of course, the Penguins development camp, and all development camps around the league started and ended last week. Of course, there was a lot of signings and news happening, so we didn't cover it too much on the channel. But Kelsey said a couple standouts were Cruz, Lucius, and Will Horkoff. Will Horkoff, we covered. He was one of their first-round picks in the draft just last week. And again, she went on to say that Horkoff has gotten better and better as camp has gone on, and he's locked in, and that's really good news. This is a guy with a big frame. He's got to work on a couple things, including his skating, but I feel like all the tools are there. We'll see if he ends up putting together, but that's pretty exciting if you're a Penguins fan. And this was from July 4th, just a couple days ago, that Ben Kindle, despite his size, and we've talked about it a lot here on the channel, making guys look absolutely ridiculous on one-on-one drills, scrimmages, stuff like that. He is putting in the work at development camp so far, and he looks like a definite standout. So yes, a little bit off the board for the Penguins, but it looks like he's going to be probably a very special player. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But let me know in the comments how you feel about the whole Bryan Rust situation. Do you want to hang on to Bryan Rust? Would you trade him for a massive haul? I don't think trading him for nothing just for the sake of trading him makes any sense. I don't think Kyle Dubas has any interest in doing that. So let me know how you feel about that in the comments. And let me know how you feel about what you saw at development camp this past week, because there was a couple standouts. We'll have some more videos about that and some of the prospects on the channel as well. So let me know how you feel. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins.